Hello, Kathy Beatty here with Divorce Support Anonymous, coming to you Friday Night Live, stepping into your life to be of help as you go through the trauma of divorce and after divorce as you develop your life. My motto is to minimize the pain that you are going through spiritually, financially, emotionally, so that we can, it's bad enough. Going through a divorce is awful. So how do we minimize the damage and make sure that we don't make it any worse than it has to be? And that is true in so many ways, financially, emotionally. If we get the support that we need, if we get that network of experts. And speaking of network of experts, I'm really excited tonight, our topic that we are going to talk about, parental alienation. So that is what our topic is tonight. I have a guest with me who is going to be joining me, and we are going to talk about this very, very important topic. You, of course, can ask your questions, make a comment, and text. So what is parental alienation? It is an attempt, a manipulation to keep children away from the other parent. And it happens, sadly. And what is so traumatic about this is the effects that it has on children. So joining me tonight to help me discuss this topic, and also to give you some legal perspective is the one and only Peter Latzman, who is an attorney, a very experienced mediator, and he is going to give us some helpful tips as we go through this topic. So good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Kathy. Glad to be here with you. Rather be on a different topic, but I'm glad to be here.
Isn't that the truth? We both know, and we have both seen as mediators, the devastating effects that it has on the parents, but certainly on the children as well. So what we want to do, Stephanie is just saying hello and thank you for this topic. Yeah, it's an important, very important topic. And it's one thing when people are going through divorce and they want to mess up their own life, but they take extra effort sometimes to mess up their children's lives. And it is so tragic to watch. We see it. Peter and I see it. We know the effects that are going to come from this. And it just makes everything so much more painful and damaging. So thank you again, Peter, for being with us. And we'll get into some questions, some real practical legal questions. First of all, I want to make about 6 comments here. And the first rule is abuse changes all the rules. We are not talking this evening about situations of physical abuse or emotional abuse, even though parental alienation can be a form of abuse. But I want you to know that if there is abuse, physical or emotional, it changes all the rules. And that is a specific category, a specific dynamic that has to be addressed separate than what we are going to cover tonight. Very important, but we're not going to cover that extreme tonight. We're going to try to keep it more general and more basic, if that makes sense. So the next point I want to state is your child needs the other parent. How important it is that a child has access to a mom and a dad. And again, if abuse is in the situation, all the rules are changed. But if there is not abuse and a parent is trying to parent, then they need to have access, total access to their children. Your child needs the other parent. Peter, I know you agree with that statement.
Without a doubt, it's difficult enough to have the parents, the father and mother, separated in life in terms of not having a combined family, but to have the family together in harmony, going the same direction with the minimum conflict. That's very, very important. And of course, the children they learn from the father, they learn from the mother, and they learn how the mother and father cooperate and deal with each other so that they use that in the future. That's how they're going to deal with their children.
Yeah, there are so many long-term effects, and we'll speak to that shortly. I do want to share with you, before we go on to the other topics, I recently, well, I guess it was pre-COVID at this point, did a seminar that involved child experts, and the title was How Not to Screw Up Your Kids Going Through Divorce. It is available on YouTube. And one of the speakers that I interviewed many child experts. And one of the speakers that I had, I would love for you to hear this little clip. It's like less than 2 minutes, but it was one of the most profound moments of that 3-hour seminar. So join me as we listen.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Thien. I'm a retired teacher and a motivational speaker, and I was asked to give a testimonial today about what it's like to have students in your classroom who have a hardship happening at home, example, like their parents are going through a divorce or separation, and what it does to children. And what a lot of parents don't understand is the breakup is traumatizing enough on them, but when the parent starts talking negatively about the other parent in front of that child will then internalize that. And I didn't think it could happen until after becoming a teacher and watching it happen over and over and over again for over 2 decades in my classroom. What happens is students or children will not take or hate the other parent more than it will hate itself. So when you're sitting there saying, that loser, I hate him, oh my gosh, she's pathetic. Well, that student, your child, is internalizing that because they will never hate their parent more than they hate themselves. I hope I made that clear. Your child will never hate that parent more than themselves. And this comes out in every aspect. Their grades decline. They give up on their passion. They give up on their hobbies. Some start picking fights. Some of them start regressing. Some of them just be careful what you say around your kids, because even though you're mad, they're taking it way different. I hope this helps.
I have watched that so many times and it still chokes me up. And alienation is one way in which we are hurting our children if we are denying them access or if we are talking poorly about their mom or their dad. So I am so indebted to Tiffany Thien for speaking those profound words. And so it's a word of caution to all of us as we are going through this process that we don't want to speak poorly. We don't want to withhold. We want to do all that we can to help the relationship with your children and the other parent to flourish so the child can benefit, so the child can grow up healthy in a healthy environment. And research shows that if you can co-parent effectively, without the arguing, without the bickering, your children are going to be okay and they're going to make it through this with minimal scarring. So indeed, the child needs the other parent. So look at the long-term effects. Look at the big picture here. I know sometimes your former spouse drives you crazy and you really do not like what he or she is doing with your children when they're there. I get it. That's when we have to step back and say, okay, my child needs it's mom or dad. I have to look at the big picture and the long-term effects of them building a relationship and me supporting that relationship.
Kathy, may I give you an example of that? There's
Yes.
a young lady, not so young anymore. She's in her 40s, was married many years ago, or not many years ago, about 15 or 20 years ago. And she had moved away from Michigan and went to the West Coast and found the love of her life and decided to get married. And I asked, without inviting her parents. So I asked the young lady, I said, why, this is the most beautiful day of your life. This is, I mean, and to be shared with your parents. And the wife responded, says, well, my mom and dad have such conflict and they've been fighting and all of this has been going on in my life and they've been bad mouthing each other and the whole thing. I just did not want to experience that anxiety on my wedding day. So rather than to choose which one to make them choose which parent are they going to have, she decided I would rather do neither. Went to City Hall, got married, and what would have been a normal, beautiful occasion turned out to be just a bureaucratic stamping of a marriage license.
Mm. What a great story. What a great lesson. And again, looking long term, that's a long term effect. You are going to have to go to these occasions of weddings and funerals with your former spouse. So, the more you can do to make it a friendly environment and encouraging. Now, you're not responsible for the other parent and the child's relationship. They are. But you just want to make sure that you are doing all that you can to encourage that. So let me just put a couple of really questions. Oh, no, no, questions are coming up. If you try to withhold the relationship of the other parent, it will backfire on you many, many times. And so, what this is going to happen, you're maybe trying to hurt the other parent, or the other parent's trying to hurt you by withholding the child. The long-term effects on this are really that parent, or you, if you're doing it, is really going to change the dynamics of that relationship with your child. So it's really going to hurt you as well as hurting the child in the long run, and it'll backfire. Peter, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, Kathy, when you talk about the long-term relationships and backfiring, we should not only identify that it's one person or the other person. Sometimes I have seen where it's sort of a mutual bad mouthing of each other or mutual alienation of the parents. And I take a look at this alienation process. I call it brainwashing. We're trying to brainwash the children to see our way, that we're the good guy, he's the bad guy, or she's the bad guy, or so on. And it's a subtle, sometimes it's an overt, conscious effort that we do to try and what I call brainwash the children. Sometimes it's unconscious. We feel that the other person has hurt us, is a bad person for whatever reason, or we think they're a bad person, and we just unconsciously send out those vibrations, if I may. So we need to take a look at our own inventory to see what we are doing as well as what the other party is doing. And
Yeah.
it's done for a couple of reasons. One is they want to get an advantage either with child support or parenting time or so on. They do it for a strategic method. And the other thing they do it is just to spite, to be malicious or so on. So there are two motivations. And as a mature mother or mature father, take a look and see what's motivating the other person, and you can combat that a little bit better if you know what's causing that attempt to brainwash the children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that many people, they're hurt, right? And many women in particular feel powerless when we go through a divorce. And we are so hurt and so distraught that we will pick up anything to throw at the other parent or at the ex-spouse. And sadly, some of us will even pick up our children and throw them. to hurt. And of course, I'm speaking figuratively, but it doesn't matter. We're just trying so hard to hurt them. It doesn't matter that we pick up the children and we use the children. And please, there's just so much damage being done to the child, to you, to your relationship with the child. You don't want these memories with your child. So now let's get into some of the how-tos. Let me touch on this one real quickly, and then we'll go into more of the how-tos. What do I do if my child wants to be with the other parent and not me? This is a topic that I hear frequently, and it's so unsettling to us. But I want to encourage you, if the child wants to be with the other parent for a time, it may be for a number of reasons. It may be that their favorite toys are over there, or the neighbors are fun to play with, or for whatever reason at the moment they feel more comfortable with the other parent. Let them go. I know it's hard for you, but let them go. They will return to you. They'll come back. But for whatever reason, they need to figure and sort through all of this trauma as well. Peter, you were going to say something?
Yeah, a little bit of advice in that, or my observation is, we think with the divorce, we're going to get 50-50, that kind of an equal share. That's a concept, a hypothetical concept in terms of splitting up the assets, in terms of having parenting time, and everything is 50-50. Well, I think that's a myth. And I think we should get that myth out of our mind. This week, it might be 60-40. Next week, it might be 60-40 the other way. For example, if you take the children on a ski vacation or a Disney World vacation, and the other spouse, well, all they can do is take them to a stay vacation here in town. This year. Next year, it may turn around. They may go on a cruise and you will have them for a stay vacation. So see the ebb and flow of the emotions, or of the time, and how they respond to you. And there's more what can I say, signs of what we might call alienation, not only of spending more time, but maybe they keep their toys at one parent's house, or they keep their favorite toy at the other parent's house, or they don't bring their stuff back to the other. So there's a whole list, a litany of things that you can take a look at, what the symptoms are of, or the results are of alienation. I know we're limited in time, and I really like to get, before we lose our audience,
Yes.
I think I'd like to talk about how do we approach this if we see this happening. And you'll see some signs, it's intuitive. What to do? What should the parent do to try and restore that equilibrium that you should have?
Yes, absolutely.
So may I
So
talk about that?
absolutely, please do. And also touch on how can we do this without keeping, a final question here is, how do we keep the children out of it as much as possible?
Well, obviously you don't fight. You don't do that in front of the children. You keep them away. And there's some basic things that you will have to discuss with the children, but you don't have to talk about the details that she did this wrong or he did that wrong. And on my birthday, he didn't come home until 9 o'clock at night, or he stopped at the bar. You don't need to go into that. That's the way to do it, is insulate them to the extent that you can from the trash.
Yeah,
Don't talk trash in front of the kids. Keep that away from them. Now,
okay. So what should I do? Oh, I'm sorry.
oh, no, that's all right, Kathy. I want to, if you see that there is a problem, my first bit of advice is you've got to get a lawyer involved with that. I'm sorry about that. I talk many times about do-it-yourself divorces, and it's not that complicated. But when you have a case of parental alienation, that gets to be a sophisticated legal process, and you should get an attorney involved. And one of the things that, or the next thing that I would suggest that you do when you talk to your attorney, have the evidence, because you're going to have to show some evidence of wrongdoing on the other party's part. And it's not going to be, well, here's some evidence she did this or he did that, or, there's a little bit. There's going to be, what we either call a preponderance of evidence. You're going to have to show that there's a substantial harm that's being that occurs. And there's two types of evidence that you're going to have to present. One is the professional expert witness type evidence, where you have a mental health professional saying that this activity that's taking place has a detrimental effect on the children. So you've got to get some mental health professional involved somewhere along the process. And then the other thing is, what are the actual sort of evidentiary things, the typical evidentiary items that you're going to present to the court? For example, do you have some documentation where they've missed parent-teacher conferences, or they've scheduled vacation, or they've scheduled doctor's appointment during your parenting time, or they've scheduled start of events of that, or that they will not let you go to family reunions? And so have that evidence, documentation, that's paper evidence, witnesses, have some neutral third-party witnesses that see that activity. And by the way, your mother is not going to be a neutral person, because there's the built-in bias of that. So you can't use family, or should not use, try and get people other than family members, because there's an immediate bias on that. So think about.
Let me have you explain more evidence. You mean text messages, emails, phone recordings?
All of those. There might be even photographs. I like my family, the family wizard, because it's unbelievable what messages one or the other party they don't think when they send the nasty messages back and forth. I'm not going to let you take the kids to your grandparents because they're a bunch of bums and they hang around with, I don't know, undesirable people. And then think about that. Documentation, logs in terms of parenting time, delaying the exchange, and even if you just overhear comments by the children that mom said this or dad said this or so on, if you just make those notes right then and there, they're immediate notes that are made.
So Peter, let me ask you, because we are running long on time, is it difficult to prove parental alienation?
Absolutely. And it's difficult, like I said, the balance of that you have to introduce, and the judge will not just be persuaded by your testimony or by the other's testimony. The judge is going to look at some objective testimony. And the other thing is that the judges hate to get involved in these kind of things, because they are disturbing the natural balance of the mother and father's participation. They are coming in as as a judge to say, hey, you're not such a good parent. You're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong. And they don't like to get that involved in that. So as they say, you've got to get your ducks in a row. You've got to really, marshal your evidence, and you've got to present it in a cogent manner. In other words, you can't do an emotional, get up there and cry, he's hurt me and he's such a bum, and, he's continuing his wayward ways and he's hanging around with wrong people. That's not going to work. You're going to have factual evidence and that professional evidence to do that. And the lawyer is the one who's going to be able to put it together. And remember, though, also that what you're doing is, if you're going to go to court with one of these cases of alienation, remember about winning the battle and losing the war. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it if it really is a case of alienation, but the kids are going to know what's going on. The
Yeah.
kids are going to know that you're taking the other parent to court to punish them in a way,
Mhm.
and that's going to have a long lasting effect. So if I were to give advice, is think about counseling, mediation, some technique before you drop the hammer of going to court.
That was exactly my next question. What are the options instead of, how do we do it instead of going to court and hiring the lawyer and spending thousands more dollars to do that process? Can you
Well,
mediate? Can you go to family therapy?
yes. Well, in Oakland County, Michigan, they have what they call a SMILE program. It's free. It's by the court. It's really a parenting class on what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Now, you don't have to go and do it with the court. There are counselors all over the place that will provide parenting class for you. Christian counselors. I'm sure that religious affiliated counselors. Don't go to the deacon at the church who's in charge of collecting money and ask them for this kind of professional advice. Be careful about that. To have a true mental health professional give that counseling, give that advice, and I think that would be another step to do. And then the other step that I would think of, because I do the mediations, sometimes the parents, like I said, this is an unconscious thing. Sometimes the parents just are not communicating on the same level. And if I can have these folks saying, do you just heard your spouse saying, here are some of the problems. Did you notice? Did you know that this was happening? Did you know that this? Well, no. And then we can go back and say, well, what can we do so that we don't repeat those mistakes? And the parents frequently can work this out themselves. And again, if they work this out themselves, it demonstrates they may not be able to be husband and wife, but they certainly have to be able to be good mother and father. And it demonstrates to the kids, hey, yeah, we had a problem, but mom and dad worked it out with the counselor. And this is what we're going to do from now on, so we don't have these bumps on the road. So yes, professional counselors, mental health people, communication with a mediator, and what other technique that you may have short of going to court. Be prepared as to what the difficulty. Again, you talk about long-term consequences. What are the long-term consequences of that type of case? And don't forget, what are the long-term consequences when you drag your spouse to court for other things like violation of parenting time, violation of child support, or so on? Are there subtle techniques that you can use without dropping the hammer on them?
Yeah, I love that. Look at the other options first. And maybe there is not an awareness. Maybe it is an opportunity for you to come to mediation or have a neutral party there so you can discuss what's going on. Because you really don't want to get into the court system with this, or with any matters for that fact, if there are things that you can handle. And it does take some humility with us as parents, but it's worth it. It's worth the effort. It's worth the time for you to step forward and say, hey, this isn't working. You and I need to talk as adults, as parents of our children, and we've got to get this right. It's too incredibly important. So I want to leave you with just a couple of scripture verses that encourage us to be moms and dads. Fathers, don't provoke your children lest they be discouraged. We don't want to discourage our children. So many adults that I work with going into support groups and going through mediations, and Peter, you as well, we see the effects of the discouragement and the pain from their own childhood raising up in their own marriage. So we want to just be at peace as much as possible, as much as we can. And then in Proverbs, hear my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Your children need both. They need dad's information and dad's influence, and they need your influence, mom. So together, if we work hard at this and we become knowledgeable of what our children need, we can do this. We can raise incredible, healthy children. And that's our goal, right? We want the long-term effect. We want to say, whoo, that was hard, but we did it, and we did it right to the best of our ability. Peter, final thoughts.
I don't want to put to make the situation worse, but we find out if we take a look at the statistics of the people who are in jail today, a vast majority, and I'm talking about more than just 50%, I'm talking about 70, 80, 90% of the people have been raised or abandoned by one or the other parent. It's not always the father who leaves the home. Sometimes it's the mother.
Yes.
And it's those that where there's only one person who participates in the raising of the child. Sometimes it's even grandma who's raising the child, and both parents have abandoned the child. So if you want the best, and this is what we're all about, I think we're all about the best interest of our children, to raise good children, fantastic, healthy, bright children. So if you want the best for your children, have a two-parent, maybe you're not married, but have a two-parent family.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Stephanie asked a question. If the conversation is more between the two exes and it's not before a court, but more of a disagreement between the two parents, and if one parent is more frustrated by the conversation, how can we handle it? So if one person is really pulling their hair out, frustrated, but the other parent thinks, no, it's no big deal. I'm assuming that's what you mean by that. Um, well, then comes in some communication. Perhaps you do still need a third party to allow you, depends on what your relationship is with your ex. Can you speak? I know when I work with people going through divorce, we typically are saying, speak only the facts, don't speak any emotional conversation, because it gets tangled up much too quickly. So if you have one parent who's more frustrated, there has to be some communication. How is that communication going to take place? And they may poo-poo it and say, well, no, that's not really true. And no, Johnny is not affected by that at all. It's a matter of maybe you talking with a therapist and you talking with a teacher and getting more facts that you can then present to, look, this is what his therapist or my therapist is saying, how this is affecting Johnny. And this is how the teacher is saying that this is affecting Johnny. It takes a lot of
Kathy,
work.
if I can just pipe in there, is if you have a competent therapist or mental health worker and or mediator, they will help you with that frustration. They will control the other person who might be over assertive. They will help you, maybe give you some of the keywords to draw out your concerns. May gives you some confidence to speak in those concerns. They can balance that situation and they can cure that frustration that you that have. So choose a good mediator, good mental health person. They can help you with that. It's not an easy task. It may not be a 5-minute conversation, but it does work, and we've seen it work in many occasions where that third person has helped to communicate. We don't know how to talk to each other nowadays. Matter of fact, today it's even getting worse because we're on our little screens and we don't even use the telephone to talk to each other. We're just sending messages. So we got to get back, learn how to communicate, especially with our spouses and our former spouses.
For the sake of our children, absolutely. Peter, it's been delightful. As always, very informative. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
You're welcome. Good night. And I wish all of those folks who are suffering through this good luck and best wishes.
Thank you. So with that, we will end our evening. We went a little long, but this is a topic that we could go on really for hours on parenting. And again, let me share with you, if you have not watched or seen the series, the video series, it's a 5-part, is actually a total of 3 hours, but they are interviews with child experts, And you will see one of them was like Tiffany Thien that you just heard from. I have Dr. Kathy Cook. Let's see, several experts, and they're not coming to mind right now. But please check it out. It's on YouTube. You're able to find it. If you don't find it, connect with me and I will send it your way. With that, we will wish you a good evening. My name is Kathy Beatty with Divorce Support Anonymous, and I am here to walk with you every step of the way through the trauma of divorce. Good evening.